Hello, everybody. Welcome to Anderson Ranch and our summer faculty lecture series. My name is Emil Gorman, and I'm the studio coordinator of digital fabrication here at Anderson Ranch. I'm thrilled that we'll be hearing from both John Hitchcock and Kristen LeVier tonight, and I want to welcome our virtual participants watching tonight, as well as our Board of Trustees and National Council. Thank you for your support. Before we begin, please take a moment to silence your cell phones. I would also like to remind everyone to attend the ranch-wide orientation right here in Shermer Meeting Hall tomorrow morning at 8:45 a.m. I want to start by recognizing that Anderson Ranch campus resides on the traditional ancestral territory of the Ute people who called the Roaring Fork Valley and beyond home for over 800 years. Through our mission to promote a wide range of arts, cultures, and voices, we commit to partner with and honor the indigenous ancestors and residents of this sacred land where we learn, work, and create. Tonight's program will consist of 2 faculty lectures, followed by a Q&A. First, it's a pleasure to introduce Kristen LeVier. Kristen creates contemporary sculpture at the intersection of art and science. Her award-winning work has been exhibited widely and featured in books and magazines, including American Craft, and in her TEDx talk, The Art of Science. Her studio is in Moscow, Idaho. Please join me in welcoming Kristen.
Hi, thank you for being here. This is my 3rd time at Anderson Ranch, and I'm so excited to be back. I'm not telling you anything you don't know, but this is a very, very special place, and it's an honor to be here. All right. So this week, I'm teaching in the Wood Studio, and I'm teaching Carving with Power, from Basics to Beautiful Sculpture. And I've already gotten to meet some of my students. It's going to be great. All right, so we are using machines called micromotor power carvers, and they have a lot of similarities with machines you probably know, Fordhams and Dremels, in that there's a burr that spins, and the outcome of what you make is determined by what burr you've chosen to use. But these machines are the next generation from the machines I mentioned before, due to improvements in electronics and I know I'm going to say this word wrong. I can't say the word miniaturization. And they truly are an advanced version of those other machines. They're a lot easier on our bodies and a lot smoother to work with. Here is a video of me just doing a little power carving. I always say, imagine that your Dremel had a baby with a Ferrari. And that's what these machines are like. One of my favorite things when I'm teaching at craft schools like this is to have a jeweler or somebody who's only used a flex shaft machine come in and visit. And then I say, you want to try the machine? They say, oh, no. And then I kind of make them. And you just see their face. They're like, oh, when's my birthday? Where do I buy this? So anyway. I live in Moscow, Idaho. I am a studio artist. So I live right on the border of Washington State. And I live in a really unusual geographic area called the Palouse. And we are surrounded by rolling hills. And it's an extremely rich agricultural area. We're known for our lentils and soybeans and wheat. This, although it looks very much like a screensaver you may have had on your machine, was taken just a few miles away from where I live by one of our local artists, Allison Meyer. So you're going to take a look at my work in the next few minutes, and you'll see that very few 90-degree angles, if any, are involved in my work. I love curves. And possibly it has something to do with living for 20 years now and surrounded by this beautiful curving landscape. Okay, so imagine I meet a stranger on an airplane, and we talk, oh, so where are you from? I'm from Idaho. What do you do? I'm an artist. And, some people, that's it. They just turn away, like, no interest. But the ones that do might say, oh, what kind of art do you do? And I say sculpture, and I kind of picture maybe something like this pops into their mind. And then, if they're really into art and they say, oh, what's your medium? And I say, wood. You just see it immediately on their head. Bam, Idaho. So no shade whatsoever. This is not an easy thing to do, but I want to say that you'll see soon that my work is very different from a chainsaw carved bear. But I bring this up, not just trying to, whatever, get a chuckle, but so we're in the West here, and there's a lot of this vernacular woodwork, Western style. But whenever someone gives me an audience and a stage, I want to mention that contemporary wood art is absolutely incredible. And if you're not interested in it or following it, you might give it a chance. I'm going to show you work from 3 of my favorite contemporary living wood artists. Alain Mayan, who is a wood turner, and if you can believe, all of these started as big chunks of brown logs, and he makes this ethereal, beautiful, beautiful work. Willie Vernier is from northern Italy, and he makes human-sized carved wood figures that always have something to do with nature or animals. So he's making a statement very much about humans and our interactions with the environment and critters around us. This is work by his son, also a sculptor working in the same ideological frame, but fine craft, fine wood art is really quite astounding and not brown and round and heavy as you might imagine. So to help you understand my work, I have to tell you about my 2 big loves in life, my interests from the time I was a child. I've always loved both art and science, not one or the other, but both. Just gonna brag here for a minute. So I have been both published and paid for my art since I was 4 years old. I mean, maybe there was like a 30-year gap there before that happened again, but anyway, so this is published from the newspaper where I grew up in Pasadena, California. To orient you to my drawing entitled A Car, that's the steering wheel up there in the top with the X in it. So, and I did spend my $2 on art supplies. But, okay, like probably every single one of you, I was a kid who was always drawing and cutting things and gluing things and hammering things. Just always had that art and craft side of me. But I also was very interested in nature. I'll say my family was the indoor type. We did not camp. But I was really interested in things like lawns in our neighborhood. But I remember repeatedly lying face down on the grass in our backyard, just like eye level with the soil, and just seeing like this ant superhighway and these other bugs doing something over there and little tiny flowers, and just being amazed that there are these other worlds around us that no one is stopping to look at. My mom saw this in me, and she signed me up for a microbiology class for kids when I was 6 years old. And in that class, it was on a community college campus, and we went out to this kind of skanky fountain and scooped up water that we looked at under a microscope. And again, I saw a little invisible world. I saw these beautiful algae kind of gracefully moving in the water and some buggy-looking things speeding around. So there's just this part of me always very interested in the kind of unseen things that make our world go round. But in our country, when you approach around the age of 18, you're supposed to like lock in. Okay, make a decision. What are you gonna do next? What do you wanna do? So I did think about, am I going to get educated in art or in science? And I'm a firstborn child. I am a rule follower, and I decided that I would study science and then have art as a hobby to keep me happy. And I dug into science very, very deeply, eventually getting degrees in molecular biology and biochemistry and getting a PhD and studying bacteria. So I first studied plants that are beneficial to agriculture and the symbiotic bacteria that live in their roots. And then eventually my work moved towards me studying just bacteria, some really nasty, nasty pathogens of animals and humans. And then I was working on antibiotic drug research. But all those years studying and working in the lab, something having to do with art or craft or making things was always a part of my life. Just a really enormous part of what my balance in my life, and just, I think, keeping me mentally okay during some of those times during the old graduate school part. So I was always making things. The universities where I studied had wood shops where you could walk in with little or no experience, and they would walk you through how to make things. I went in because I needed furniture, and I was poor, but I had good taste in furniture, so I had to learn how to make it. So here's me looking very 90s in the MIT wood shop. Look at those Frankenstein shoes that I'm wearing there. Anyway, so our house is quite literally littered with furniture that I made during a couple decades in my younger years. But it's definitely the gateway drug to woodworking for me. Okay, so I always loved science, I always loved art, but how did I make the transition from being a scientist to being an artist? I think many people have that desire, the thing they didn't do. There's many reasons why people do things, and for me, I finally was brave enough to make this change by sort of piggybacking on my husband. He is a scientist, and he was offered a tenure track faculty position in Moscow, Idaho, and it seemed like a perfect time for me to make that big lifelong change. We had young kids, and also this was not a trivial motivator. It was a lot cheaper to live in Moscow, Idaho than the larger East Coast and Midwest cities we had been living in before. Okay, so I'm gonna do it. It took me years to even admit that I wanted to actually be an artist. I would say I'm gonna do woodworking, but I always wanted to be an artist. Okay, so when I told people that I was gonna make this big change, there were a handful that just said, I always knew you were gonna do something like this. That's great. Then there were the ones who were like, oh my God, I'm so jealous. But mostly, especially the scientists in my life, just could not believe that anybody could be a scientist and an artist. Like that just seemed completely insane and impossible to them. Science, you have this like hardcore, man, you're just doing all your experiments and doesn't matter what you look like. And art's all fancy and you have weird asymmetrical haircuts and stuff. But I will tell you that not only the wardrobe, which I must admit is quite similar in both of my jobs, right? And the personal protective equipment, but to me there are so many similarities in how I worked when I was a scientist as how I work now. You have to be driven by curiosity. There's a lot of problem solving, a lot of thinking, a lot of exposure to experience with failure. You try something new, sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. In 2019, I gave a TEDx talk called The Art of Science about exactly this, my thoughts of the similarities between how people need to work and think to be successful in these two seemingly very different fields. But I also speak most of the time actually about the work of 5 artists working at the intersection of art and science, and they are doing absolutely incredible work. So you can Google my name or look in YouTube to find this video, but you will be exposed to some fabulous work. All right, so I made this big change from scientist to budding artist, and somehow I just had in my mind that these were going to be 2 totally different things. It never occurred to me that the things I loved from science, like flagella and tentacles and weird microscopic textures, would make its way into my art. But now I think it's ridiculous that I didn't realize that. So, of course, you'll see in the work that I show you, it is very much inspired by the absolute beauty and wonder I see in nature, even if, for me, it's less like a big pink rose than an electron micrograph view of the skin of like a zebrafish, something like that. It occurred to me when I was writing this talk that I have now been a working artist for 20 years, which is exactly how long I was working and studying as a scientist, with a few years overlap, but that blows my mind. All right, so I want to talk to you about 3 major areas that my work focuses on. The first and largest being science and nature. So this is 3 different views of a carved wood leaf. So in a piece like this, the science is very overtly folded in, where I've just hand-drawn chemical structures on the outside of this piece. But most of my work, I fold science and kind of the wonder of nature in a more impressionistic manner. So for instance, this vessel, the texture on it was inspired by those gorgeous skeletons of diatoms. You know, these little, they look like little alien structures. They're so fabulous. And they are, diatoms are photosynthetic algae that are found in waters and soil all over our planet. Sometimes I'll take something that I like from nature, like seeds or pollen grains, leaves, something where I like the shape, and I will use it as a canvas on which to play around with carving textures and adding colors. A few pieces of my work, I've sort of abstracted kind of standard religious symbology for things that are holy or sacred. I don't mean to do it in any way in a sacrilegious way, but to me, the things that have always felt most sacred in this planet come from nature, so that's what that bit of work was about. And sometimes I'm just interested in taking something that I love that I think maybe we see so often, people aren't even noticing it anymore, something like leaves. So this piece on the left, it's about 3 inches in height when hung on a wall, but just sort of the repetition, I don't know, I hope that it honored something that we see every day and kind of reminded us to look at it with fresh eyes. So my work involves a lot of curviness, and that is another way that science is a part of my artistic practice. This is tough. I give long lectures on this, so I want to do this really, really quick. Okay, so when you're in school, you probably learned that cellulose is a big part of wood and plant fibers. So there's just long strings of glucose molecules, and they bundle together, about 40 of those, to create a cellulose bundle that's represented by this yellow kind of cube there, cuboidal structure. So one cellulose bundle itself, if you imagine a tree trunk just filled with all these cellulose bundles going up and down, on its own, one cellulose bundle would not be a very strong, rigid thing, but all of these bundles are in a matrix of other chemicals, mostly lignin, something that has a very glue-like quality. And when all those cellulose bundles are glued together, it gives trees incredible strength, but with a little bit of flexibility so that they can bend and not break in the wind. So I, along with countless woodworkers for millennia, make use of the chemical and physical properties of wood to sort of bend it to our will. So how you do this is simply by taking a piece of wood and exposing it to high temperature. One of the chemical bonds involved in that glue cellulose matrix, those chemical bonds break when they reach a certain temperature. So you steam a piece of wood. I'm making this sound easy. It is hot, it's messy, you might get burned, whatever. You boil your piece of wood for a proper amount of time for the size and species of wood. Then you pull it out very quickly, and you bend it into a shape that you want. There are limitations on what you can get away with. But you have to do it quickly because that chemical bond is only broken temporarily at the high temperatures. And when it's broken, these cellulose fibers can move relative to one another, and you are able to bend wood. Once you have immobilized the wood into the shape you want, you need to clamp it or do something to hold it there. The temperature will come down, and those chemical bonds will reform and give you a nice bend in your piece. A fair amount of time, you will get a failure. So experimentation, failure. All right, I'm also very interested in motion in nature. I love things kind of gently moving in water, things blowing in wind, and yet my medium is wood, which, imagine a plank of wood. It's a very rigid, non-motion-y type of thing, but I don't know, I seem to be obsessed with trying to make work like that. So in some cases, in a piece like this, I aimed to get that motion mostly through carving. And a lot of my work, these are a few inspired by microbial creatures and things maybe living in the depths of the ocean. The bends or the motion comes from bending wood, like I told you about. Sometimes I want to draw the eye in more from just the shape of something I've made, so I will carve a texture on the piece to really try to draw people in, maybe make them want to kind of caress the piece. And then other times I'm just interested in sort of a feeling. So this, I wanted it to look very regal, and this piece was inspired by my dog Hagrid, who's a very strange dog, and he strikes the most fabulous poses. I'm also very interested in connection and protection in this world. So some of my work includes things you might imagine from different parts of the natural world kind of wrapped or entwined together. I know I was talking about the chainsaw art bear and saying my work isn't like that. This bear is one that I made for teaching workshops this summer. It is a teaching aid, and it is made using 7 different wood joinery techniques, most of them stolen directly from furniture making. But I finished my bear, my teaching aid bear, and I was like, I gotta wrap it and leave. So I don't know, there's something about me, I wanna animals, plants, whatever. A fair amount of my work involves something that wraps around something else, and in general, that is a way I symbolize protection, one thing kind of nurturing and taking care of another. I used to do this more with snakes. They are symbols of protection in many different cultures around the world, but I will tell you, people do not like these. No one's buying, they're great pieces. People are not buying them. I'm hoping Year of the Snakes, I can get someone to buy these. All right, and then the last type of work that I've done quite a lot of, unexpectedly, is spoon making. Spoon carving is so fun. You see a lot of it now. It's very trendy for a great reason. To me, I think of them as miniature sculptures. They're very fun, bite-sized pieces. But I made this, my first spoon, many, many years ago. This is 2 images of the same spoon. So it's made out of one piece of wood that I sawed, carved, and bent. But I made this when my children were very young, and it was a time when I was heavily into nurturing and taking care of them. And somehow my brain just latched onto a spoon as a symbol of love and family and caring. And I don't know, I can't let go of it. I'm still making spoons happily nearly 20 years later. Not quite 20. So I'll show you a few of my spoons. These days, my spoons tend to be at least 18 inches tall, if not more than that, and I always include wall-hanging mechanisms on them. I think of them as talisman that you could hang on the wall of your home and look at every day. To me, I want them to serve as reminders of the really, truly, truly important love in our lives, not the whole, here's a diamond necklace, and here's a sports car, the stuff we see all the time in media, but, the true love, this is the people who are actually feeding you and taking care of you when you're sick. And so I just hope that these being hung somewhere can be a daily reminder of these very special relationships in your life, whether it's romantic, family, chosen family, whatever. And since my children have grown and flown out into the world, somehow just feathers just popped up in my spoons. I think now of them as symbols of bravery and willingness to go out and explore. Okay, I want to talk about you for a few minutes. Am I doing okay on time? Okay, I have just one thing that, so I live in Moscow, Idaho. It's the middle of nowhere, and yet I was invited twice to teach at Anderson Ranch, right? And some of my work has been in magazines. How on earth did that happen, right? I mean, I still can hardly believe it. But I want to tell you that something I did very early on, I think made this difference. And I want to talk to you about it because there may be somebody here that's looking to take your practice to the next level or get more exposure. So I'm going to tell you something that worked well for me. And that was to make use of juried shows and calls for entry. So this is something is published and somebody's looking for art and you submit images of your work. For me, there were just enormous benefits. I went from a job where I had a boss, and if I didn't do my experiments and show up at work, I would get fired, to I'm my own boss. And anyway, the deadlines that I got by choosing something to apply for and just saying, okay, I'm going to do this, it added the structure to my art practice that I really needed. A lot of times, calls for entry will have themes or restrictions. Maybe, the theme is endangered species or the blues, something like that. And so, I would choose which calls to apply for, but nearly always they pushed me a little bit outside of the work I was currently making, so they really helped my work to evolve and really push me out of my comfort zone. Exposure is a great thing you can get out of this. I mean, certainly if your work is juried in and that it's shown in an exhibit, you're going to get exposure that way. But even if you're not accepted for a show, if you get your work in front of a juror that's important to you, someone you want to know that you're alive, I mean, that's worth a lot. And you may have been the very next person they would have chosen, but they ran out of room or too many jewelers applied to the show. But that exposure, I think, is a really important thing, vulnerable thing to do, but very, very important. If your work does get accepted, then you have material to put on your resume. So when you switch jobs like I did, you have a resume with nothing on it but your name, so very helpful. And now about 20 years in, I would say that the comfort I've gotten with rejection through this process has been such an important thing, because we put our passion into our work. Not everybody likes the same thing, and sometimes your work isn't accepted for some reason you'll never find out about that may have nothing to do with how good it is. But comfort with rejection is a really important thing for people in creative fields to have, I would say. Okay, so mostly I find calls from a free website called callsforentry.org. This is just one call that I just cut and pasted to show you. So usually there's going to be the name of the show. This is called Fire 2025. Information's like when the deadline is, if it's a physical versus a virtual exhibit that you're applying for, maybe some information about the topic. Almost always it tells you the fee. This one is strangely free, but these days it usually costs at least $50 to apply to anything. But really useful, this website. It has a great search engine too, where you can put in specifics you're interested in. Where are other places you could find calls? Many museums or galleries have, maybe the smaller ones, have annual or every so many years juried shows. That's a great place to look. And the magazines or websites in your own field. Sometimes there will be calls in the back of the magazines. But beyond that, if there's an artist that you are interested in, you think, you know, they're doing what I want to do, you might go to their website, look at their resume, and see where they've been exhibiting. And if some of those were in juried shows, that may make sense for one for you to apply to. And then city arts departments have lots of calls for murals and other things. This is the result of a call for entry from the city of Moscow, Idaho. I designed these city tree grates many, many years ago, and I got $100 to thank me for it. But that's fine. I'm not kidding you. There used to be like 3 of them. There's like 50 of them. Everywhere I go somewhere new, I'm like, is that? Anyway, they're my design, and it is lentils. I chose lentils because they have these cute little curly vines at the tip, and we're the lentil growing capital of the world, the Palouse. Anyway, bragging again. Anyway, but it's so cool because there's like 50 of them all over town, and it's cast metal. All my woodwork could go down up in flames and just disappear, and this is metal, so anyway. But also, I see a lot of calls for those plastic electrical boxes where people used to paint murals directly on them. Now, mostly, they're printed on vinyl and wrapped around them. In my little dinky city, you get $1,000 for if your design is accepted for one of their vinyl wraps, and they usually stay for 2 to 4 years. This is a recent submission that I submitted to the city. It was rejected, and you know what? I got the email. And I was like, eh. So I am comfortable with rejection at this point. All right. Well, thank you. I hope that's helpful for anybody. Yeah. Thank you very much, and. I hope I'm going to be here all week eating and walking around, so I would love to talk to anybody who's interested. And you can find me on Instagram and my website. Thank you. Do you want to hold this? I'm afraid I'm going to drop it and then I'll. Thank you.
Get mine. It's in your court. Okay, cool.
Thank you so much, Kristen. Now I would like to introduce John Hitchcock. John Hitchcock is a Distinguished Achievement Professor at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. Awards include Robert Rauschenberg Foundation Grant, Jerome Foundation Grant, and Artist in Residence at the American Culture Center, Shanghai, China, the Franz Mazriel Centrum, Casterly, Belgium, Proyecto Ache, Buenos Aires, Argentina, and the Venice Printmaking Studio, Venice, Italy. Please join me in welcoming John.
All right. Here we go. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Kristen, for that wonderful talk. I am not a scientist, so bear with me. I will talk like an artist and a thinker, and definitely not a scientist, though. So what I'm going to do is talk about my relationship to where I grew up, where I'm at now, and installation-based work as well. And I'm going to talk a little bit about Oklahoma, because that's where I'm from, and I'm going to give you a little taste of Oklahoma, and then we'll get into the talk. And there should be sound. We had it earlier. Cool. So, what you're looking at. That's what you're looking at. Buffalo. So a lot of the work I do involves music as well and collaboration. So this is actually a collaboration with a musician from Alvaro Torres from Mexico, and he's doing the guitar sounds and combined with my video. And a lot of this is projected within my work as well. So land, where I grew up. So I grew up on Comanche tribal lands in Lawton, Fort Sill, Oklahoma. It's next to the Wichita Mountains area, and this is the Wichita Mountains. And it's a very important component of a lot of tribal people, and particularly Plains tribes in that region. So the Wichita Mountains is a wildlife refuge that runs east and west. And at one time it was as big as the Rockies, but now it's these giant boulders, so it's a lot smaller now. And the wildlife refuge was built in 1901, and it was established as a place for various habitats such as buffalo, elk, deer, longhorn as well, longhorn cattle. And this is Mountain Scott you're seeing, and I think I have another picture of Mountain Scott here. Very important place for a lot of, particularly the Kiowa, Comanche, and Apache people, and the Kiowa and Comanche people of Oklahoma. It's a significant spiritual space and a place that I only lived 2 miles from, and so I spent a lot of my youth there, and so a lot of the images you're going to see are in reference to that location. Also in that area, adjacent to the Wichita Mountains, is Fort Sill. So Fort Sill, in contrast, is one of the largest field artillery training bases in the United States. Historically, it's known as a post. It's a post that was established in the 19th century Indian Wars. And Fort Sill was basically, the land there was Kiowa Comanche and the Wichita land. So Fort Sill served as an internment camp for many indigenous leaders such as Geronimo of the Apache people, St. Thayde of the Kiowa people who were descended of, and then Quanah Parker of the Comanche people as well. So currently it's defined by, particularly that part of Oklahoma is defined by the KCA, Kiowa, Comanche, and Apache people. And I grew up in this environment. This was a powwow I went to recently back home, the Kiowa powwow, Rapuite, who's the daughter of Sitaide. And so it was a family gathering. And so being at this home and being with family and that relationship and being so far away from me, living in Wisconsin, I'm a professor at University of Wisconsin. I've been there for 24 years, so I try to go back at least a couple times a year to be home with family. So Fort Sill. So Oklahoma State Highway 49 separates the land I grew up on, which was Comanche tribal land. My mom's enrolled Comanche. I'm enrolled actually Kiowa and also Comanche. Only enrolled in one tribe, and then my dad is German and Dutch from Michigan, so he actually ended up at Fort Sill because of the Korean War. And that sort of intercultural relationship and that reality of growing up as biracial has had a huge impact on me. And also Fort Sill. My dad actually, he built the gun, he worked at Fort Sill after the military, and he helped put poured concrete for this gun walk. And I felt it kind of, really bizarre, help preserve our heritage, do not climb on the weapons. And so that was always memorable when I took this photo and I go back and the kinds of situations that we continue to be involved in. And this was a piece called Impact versus Influence. It was for an exhibition called The Land Carries Our Ancestors, contemporary Native artists at the National Gallery in Washington, D.C. And this was a really important work for me because it was merging and bringing together those two locations, the Wichita Mountains and Fort Sill, and that conversation. And that opportunity came about from John Quick-to-See Smith, the late John Quick-to-See Smith, who provided the platform for me to make this piece and go about doing this installation. And all this is done with screen printing and also vinyl. And so the screen printing are multiple pieces that are cut up and then assembled on the wall. So, like I said, much of the work for me that I currently make is about honoring my Kiowa and Comanche relatives and that relationship of the place I grew up on and the language of that space. And so I've always approached a very contemporary approach to thinking and material practice while also paying homage to my culture, but on the other end, thinking about the celebration of aesthetics and how we're moving forward with what we make and how we make as artists in particular. So images include abstract shapes of circles, stars, and hourglass. A lot of this is very symbolic and referencing those places. And then I usually will put in these particular installation this line, I'm calling it a landline, that is also it looks like skin cells too, like a microscopic section of a skin cell, but it's referencing the minerals and the rights over minerals and the idea of what's below the land, what's on the land, the animals that are on the land, and then what's above the land, the cosmos and stars and clouds and such.
Story that was told by old man Toheen back in summer of 1926, which is where the Indian Hospital is now. He was a patient, and he was always there, you know. And him and old man Joshua and Ned Timbers' father-in-law. They seem like everyone knows them both.
So the speaker is my grandfather, and so I was fortunate to get a reel-to-reel from him that he recorded this conversation. Well, he didn't record the conversation, but he basically explained that conversation and recorded himself on a reel-to-reel. And so later on, this was probably in the 90s when he gave me that, and I'm a musician as well, and so I took it and put it into another recording unit, and then I ended up turning it into digital format later and was able to start using it. And the musicians that I'm playing with, we created an album, which I'll talk about in a second. So Oklahoma, that influence, my kaku, my grandmother, the Comanche side, she was really instrumental in my thinking about design and line and drawing in particular. And Grandma she basically taught me how to draw. So as a little kid, I would go to her beadwork table and she would scatter the beads on the table, and she'd hand me she'd tear off a piece of a paper bag and say, "Hey, I want you to draw." And so she'd hand me that bag and some matte pencils. And I want you to think about these designs, these geometric shapes, and I want you to draw those. And then she'd tell me to go outside, and outside she'd have me look at the flowers and look at her rose garden and draw those, and I'd come inside, and then she'd lay those drawings down, and she'd start talking about the drawings, and talking about colors of the day and the colors of the night colors and day colors, and then she'd say, "Okay, now I want you to make it up. Use your imagination and draw." And so then I would do that drawing, and then we would have a conversation again about the work. And it's not much different than what I do now at the university. I sit there with students, we have these conversations. We talk about imagination, we talk about drawing from actual observation, and I think it's the process of the critique or the conversation, and I think I've learned that pretty much from that upbringing and having that kind of lucky and fortunate to have someone in my life that was willing to talk about these things. And actually the piece on your left is a design I made and she beaded. And it was a collaboration, and I actually attached it to a drawing later on. And this piece on the right is one of her designs. And over the years, she's passed away quite a while ago, but I was fortunate to acquire a lot of the beadwork that she had done, and also other beadworks that she had collected from, that she wore, that were made for her. And so I have this moccasin collection, and earlier there was a drawing of the buffalo going by, and that was done at the Buffalo Bill Historic Museum, and I did a residency at the Plains Museum there. And during that time, I was actually studying and looking at Kiowa and Comanche objects or living objects. And I thought from that moment, I was like, well, I should be doing this with our stuff. Like, we have this now and in the family. And so I started doing a lot of my drawing and design work off of this beadwork and these moccasins. And I love the fact that you can both sides of this and just seeing the amount of wear and tear that's in these moccasins.
He said they go on the hunting party and they show the boys how to kill buffalo, and then how they would dress them. And that old man said that they'd never waste nothing. They would bring everything back, and they would utilize everything, he said.
On the days leading up to his passing, several owls were hovering over the house, and one landed on the roof. At that time, we knew. Me, my brother, sister, and cousins all left the house to give our Comanche grandmother time alone with him. Grandfather passed away in her arms as she sang traditional songs to him.
What do we got? That's my song, John. You must learn it.
So printmaking, a huge vehicle for me in thinking about how multiples and the multiples of ideas, the use of video projection, the use of flat work, basically making flat sculpture, creating space, having family members that were willing to allow me to do that as a kid in my room, hanging posters everywhere, drawing on the walls. So all of that was a huge influence, and then at the same time, playing guitar as a 15, 14-year-old. And so wrapping that up, and then now kind of at this age, finally realizing like I should start bringing these together. And so that's how these installations started to happen. And this is called Blanket Songs, and we're defined by the beat, and the drum is in the center of this, and it has the video projection of what you saw earlier. And then inside of this, you can walk through and around the artwork, which is all screen printed and hand drawn and painted into. So this new body of work is based on time spent at those places, but the relationship of that space and layering and music is a huge part of my existence and how I work.
Nami Sutaina Anan Suwakayu Nana Anan Sutai Kita O Yokana Nami Sutaina Nami Sutaina Anan Suwakayu Nana Anan Sutai Kita.
So that's Marla Nonai, who's Comanche, and she was singing a blessing song. And so we did an album called Blanket Songs, and Marla was on it. Also had recordings of my grandmother from the 90s, and then also stories that I told, and those were interwoven. And all that's on Apple Music and Spotify and all that. If you look up Blanket Songs, and the band that's playing that is called The Stolen Sea. And so we've done a lot of projects, actually. And as I said earlier, printmaking was probably, trying to start a video here. We'll see if it's working. Okay. So this is sort of a history of work I've done over the past 24 years teaching at Madison. This was at Venice at the Biennale in 2011. We did print installations and print actions where we print lives. This was at the Rauschenberg Center, and this is in Boise, Idaho. And so I would travel around and do projects with students and teach screen printing like at that time, and we do sometimes 24-hour projects where we print all night to make when I was younger. I can't do that anymore. That's like, whoa, I can barely get up these stairs right now. You know. And so the idea, too, is portability, and then also coming from a Plains tribe and thinking about how things have to be able to move and move on and be portable. These signs were in reference to commodity foods that were distributed on tribal lands, but also to welfare programs in the third world countries. So back in the late early 2000s, I was using those commodity images back then too. And performance, I'm going to do a few more things and call it because I'm almost done time-wise. So performance, again, this is the band I play with, and one of the things is Stolen Sea. We had the opportunity to create an installation or a music performance in an album that was called Bury the Hatchet, and this was at the Missoula Art Museum. And this is in 2019, and so these are the sketches and drawings. Laura Millen, the curator, of the museum asked if I had a whole space, what would I be able to do with it? So I created this drawing, and then we actually built the space, and it happened, and we did a live performance in that space too. So in the 1980s, I played in a lot of death metal and punk bands and such, and so it was really exciting to just play music with an opera singer, and because she could hit the really unique high notes. So we did this album, Bury the Hatchet, and as being a printmaking person, we did screen printed as well and did letterpress imagery that was part of the album that was included in it as well, and it had white vinyl. And this is at the, I think the Portland Art Museum. It traveled around. And us, I'm gonna talk about neon and 2 more pieces and I'll be done. All right. So my use of neon. So I've been thinking about neon and it's how it's presented, particularly in derogatory ways, how I've seen it used, particularly on Route 66 and going towards New Mexico and on the way from Oklahoma, and these derogatory images of indigenous people. And I wanted to kind of rethink that, and how can we as Native people reclaim neon and use that in a positive way. And in this case, I'm using the medicine wheel and the hourglass and the arrows pointed at each other, along with screen prints that were done at the Oklahoma State University. And so that notion of reclaiming, rethinking, remaking. Namana, which is a Comanche word, it means Comanche or the people. And the word, so Namana is the people, but the word Comanche is actually a Ute word, and the Ute word, which means always against us. So they were scouts that were actually helping the military hunt the Comanche. So that's a unique kind of thing about where the word Comanche comes from, but Namana is the true word of the people. And then Thaiba, which means white person, and it actually means list checker or keeping track. And so being both that and Kiowa, so those relationships and making this neon and thinking in terms of that biracial relationship. And then it says decolonize on the back, the big D, and then colonize. And this was also a series of works from the Bury the Hatchet imagery that is referencing again, the buffalo and the importance of buffalo and how they relate to the reference to a cultural experience or where I come from. And this is in reference to St. Thai Day. And again, back to that recontextualizing and thinking about this in a positive way where you're respectfully honoring the elders and ancestors by celebrating indigeneity.
The city gets itty bitty when taking flights. Polka dot lights, flicker top plots, nice. Reminds me of my Midwest dreams. Writing cursive in my jet streams. The work has never been 50-50, it's been on moi. From the jump and duck on these fuckers foie gras. And that's big old facts. Spitto really got me tiptoeing maps. I've been on my shit since a kiddo. Ride around inside my mind, riddled with fiddle. Strap in a mighty fine journey, gotta reaffirm that. Smile lines earned and burned into my face. When relaxed, spin it wop on a cheap grill so I don't relapse. Palm trees still give me chills. Posted in a gash in the cut like a tourniquet strut. With my lover, just us. Overthinking all, try not to, but.
So these are soft sculptures, and this was done at the Madison Museum of Contemporary Arts. It's actually up right now, and I'm using ribbon work and the relationship of ribbon and the importance of that within culture, but also the relationship of the Great Lakes, because ribbon was introduced in the 19th century by fur traders to the Ojibwe people. And so the Ojibwe were the ones who originally were using ribbon, but it's become more of a cultural experience or a pan-Indian amongst many tribes. And I was thinking in terms of the chair, the powwow chair that you see at powwows, but turning it into ribbon and referencing those experiences and having a dimensionality to it. So this is a new one. This is called Honor Song, and it's definitely a horse. And it's got a horse mask over the top and then the long trailing ribbon. There's a lot of symbolic references, which I'm running out of time. I'm just going to run through these real quick and get to, here's a whole series of the horse mask. I had an opportunity to do a show in Kentucky, and during that exhibition, the opportunity came about, and I was already starting to make these horse masks, and so I was wanting to do a whole series and a body of work around it, and the horse came out of that, as well as these prints on naga hide. I'm using naga hide material. I don't know, does anybody know what naga hide is or heard of naga hide? So it's a faux leather, and it's great for screen printing and drawing back into. And I love the idea of this material as this plastic and how it's really not good for the environment, but on the other end, reusing it and recycling it and kind of thinking about how do you reuse items that I've had this material that I used from about 10, 15 years ago, and so I've been bringing it back out and reworking back into the naga hide to create these pieces. And then the last body of work is color. So this is a soundscape series, and this whole body of work was, again, from travel, like traveling to different places I go to as an artist, but also on my own, just experiences of different places I've been in the world, and thinking about sound, in particular, the sounds of nature, but also the sounds of the land, but also sounds that are violent or that are out there, that are agitating. In particular, Fort Sill, back to that, the booming sounds of the military and of guns going off and such, and growing up with that as a youth. And then also the sound of the drum at a powwow, and then that nature of sound and how it operates and how it comes out. And also there's these little dot shapes, which is back to the motif of the beadwork image that I'm using. And that's it. Oraho, thank you. And we'll be very excited to meet everyone while we're here and visit and talk and all of that, and come see us in screen printing, because we're going to do some crazy things.
Thank you so much, John. We have time for a short Q&A. If anyone has a question for either artist, please raise your hand and I can bring the mic over to you.
Hi, John. Hi, Kristen. Thank you for your talks. Something that stood out to me about both of you, and I have a question for both of you, is that you both had these really rich previous lives or things that have influenced your work and continue to feed your practice. And amazing observation is involved in that. I'm always thinking of artist's job as an observation, the observationalist. And so I'm kind of curious about how you have observed people experiencing your work and how that observation of their experiencing your work has influenced you in turn.
I think by making the multimedia installations, that's probably for me a way of seeing a viewer in a participatory situation. And I think that's how I've always thought about art. And that might be because I grew up going to American Indian dances or powwows since I was a little kid. And there's a lot of participation in that where you have the drum itself, the singers around that, the dancers around that, the audience, or the people around that, anybody who's participating in this, then the arena stand, the arena director, and then you've got relationships with the conversations that happen at, to go buy a pickle, at the concession stand. And so there's all these things that revolve around communication. And then I take that to printmaking. Printmaking's the same thing. You're in a shop where you've got certain variables. There's protocol and rules that revolve around that. There's protocol and rules that revolve around a gathering. And so then if you take that to being a musician, it's the same thing. When you're playing with people in a band, then there's certain protocol of how you don't overplay, do you underplay, do you lay down a line so that there's some rhythm so that someone has a chance to shine and you're not trying to be the only one soloing all the time. So I think that is the thing, is how do you be inclusive within any of these situations and not showboat, and be able to have that conversation. And then how do you have the conversation so that you do learn from it? And I think I was fortunate to be taught that as a little kid, and I try to keep that in mind when I'm in the shop or any situation.
I think I have a lot less experience of seeing people interact with my work because of living in the middle of nowhere and sending a lot of work out to exhibits it was juried into. I don't think I have seen a lot of responses, actually. Although it's clear that some of my work, particularly the walking microbial-inspired pieces, they're very polarizing, as they should be. Some people are drawn in, oh, that's cool, that's interesting, what is that? And other people are like, what, like, who would make this? And that's fine with me, do I have more experience in that? I do fabric and wallpaper design as well. Also, it's more mainstream than this. But yeah, it is interesting when I do some just markets and things like that, seeing people walk by, and some people just go without a second glance and other people are drawn in. It's such a fascinating thing to experience. And I think what I was talking about before about being okay with rejection, I thought it would be so hard to put something that I made into the world and put it in front of people. I don't think I could have been an artist when I was 22. I don't think I was strong enough for that. But now I'm like I probably don't like your lacy kitten curtains in your kitchen, right? And of course you don't like my walking microbe. So I find the little bit where I've seen people respond very interesting. And I think it's only since I started working as an artist when I was older that I was not sensitive to any negative stuff. I don't know. I love the installation in your work is so environmental, and I think that's the kind of work that for me, it's not like, oh, you look at one piece, you're immersed. It brings up so many more emotions, and yeah, I think the question, the answer is much more interesting coming from you and your work. That's about all I have on that.
Okay, well then I guess a good follow-up question would be, is there an experiment that you were doing in the lab that you've always dreamed about making a large-scale installation?
Ooh, that's such a good question. Okay, I'm gonna kind of think while I'm answering this. My mom received a heart transplant 20 years ago and is just doing well. I mean, you don't get on the transplant list if you're doing well. So it's a miracle to me that she's still there. And there's one anti-rejection drug that you have to take for the rest of your life when you've received a transplant. And I I used to have it memorized, looked at the structure of that molecule over and over and over again. It's not an attractive molecule. Some of them look cool, they have rings, and I just feel like I have to do something. It's called tacrolimus. I got to do something with that. I'm going to think about, I'm really glad you asked this question. I don't have the answer for you now, but I imagine it's going to be in my dreams.
Yeah.
Thanks for asking.
Yeah. John, I have one question for you. Sorry. When you use like military imagery next to all of these like other parts and fragments of installations, how do you avoid letting the machinery of war, how do you avoid letting the machinery of war overshadow the stories of like resilience and like the native like hope and love?
I think the machinery of war is embedded into the conversation that has so many complexities that it's impossible to not think about it. And if you think of veterans and societies that are, particularly in Native culture and service to the military and the importance of that and honoring them and honoring the veterans, there's that conversation. Then you're thinking, well, there's the conversation of, well, what did the military do to tribal people? That movement and pushing and colonization and pushing off of land and taking land and all of that. There's that history, so it's embedded. Then there's the code talkers, which served the country, that fought for their people, fought for tribal people. For many tribes, there were many tribes that had code talkers, and so there's so many types of conversations that can happen that revolve around that notion of weaponry or warriorism. And so then the question is, well, what is warriorism? Like any of us that serve, that don't serve in the military, but serve within academia and teaching, or serve running, an experience like this, a residency program, those are warrior moments too, like although that has to do with it. And so it just brings broader questions. And I think I was misunderstood early on when I was using that type of imagery, but I was always thinking in terms of how that's a vehicle, literally, a tank, helicopter, plane, any of that. But they're also named after, not all of them, but a lot of those helicopters and military weaponry are named after tribal people, and they're named after living people. And then on the other end, those living people, tribes, fought within these wars to protect the land, and it's protecting their land, where they're from, where we're from, not so much the idea of America, but the idea of where we're from and what our land means to us. And so that's what I think about those notions of when I see that imagery, how it's painful, but it's also part of the experience of what we live through. I don't know if that exactly answered it, but that's kind of, yeah.
All right, thank you so much. As a reminder, please meet here at 8:45 in the morning for a ranch-wide orientation. Thanks.
Thank you all.
Thank you.